Have you ever just stopped and wondered why some of the most brilliant people we know are behind some of the biggest blunders in history? Well, that's the exact paradox we're diving into today, the intelligence trap.
It's a question that really challenges a core belief for a lot of us, right? We just assume that a high IQ or a fancy education acts like some kind of shield against failure. But what if that assumption isn't just a little bit off, but is actually dangerously wrong? Let's get into it. All right, so let's kick things off with this foundational myth. We instinctively connect things like a degree from a top university or a genius-level IQ with good judgment. We see that raw intelligence and think, yep, that person's going to make the right call.
But, history tells a completely different story. When you look at these massive failures, we're talking shattered economies, broken scientific theories. They weren't caused by a lack of brain power, not at all. They were often led by teams of celebrated experts, the very people we thought were just too smart to fail.
And this really brings us to the core idea of this whole thing. A powerful intellect can be like a megaphone. If you're not careful, it doesn't just make mistakes, it amplifies them, creating bigger, more convincing, and honestly, more elaborate forms of foolishness.
So how does this trap actually work? Well, it all comes down to how we use our intelligence. Is it a flashlight for finding the truth? Or is it a hammer for defending what we already think is true? Think about it this way. On one hand, you have what standard intelligence tests are good at measuring. Things like logic puzzles, spotting patterns, memory games. It's all very neat and tidy. But then you have what they don't measure, our ability to handle uncertainty, to actually weigh evidence fairly, and to manage our own biases. All the messy skills you need for sound judgment out in the real world. And get this, research actually shows a high IQ can come with some very real disadvantages. Smart people can become totally blind to their own flaws. They often don't bother looking for opinions that challenge their own. And, this is the most dangerous part, they can be masters at building these incredibly complex, logical-sounding arguments to justify why they were right all along, even when they were wrong.
This is just such a crucial point. Intelligence can stop being a tool for discovery and become a performance of certainty. It becomes a way to act like you've thought everything through, instead of actually, rethinking it. And this trap doesn't just apply to general intelligence. Oh no, it gets even more dangerous when we talk about experts. You'd think that deep, specialized knowledge would be the ultimate protection. But a lot of the time, it just creates a more specific and even deeper blind spot.
Just picture an experienced doctor, okay? They see a patient's symptoms, they recognize a pattern they've seen 1,000 times before, and they go right to the standard treatment. This mental shortcut is usually super efficient, but that exact efficiency can cause them to completely overlook that one tiny, weird detail that points to a totally different, rare disease. Their own expertise has created a cognitive highway that's just really hard to get off of.
And it's so important to get this. This isn't necessarily about ego or arrogance. It's a fundamental downside of having a highly optimized brain. The mental highways that make an expert so fast and effective are the very same ones that can blind them to an off-ramp leading to a different, better answer.
Okay, so what happens when you take a whole bunch of these highly intelligent expert individuals and you put them all in a room together? You'd probably expect a symphony of brilliant ideas, right? Well, a lot of the time, you get the complete opposite. The intelligence trap just scales up.
The NASA Challenger disaster is just a tragic and, frankly, perfect example. There were brilliant engineers who knew something was wrong. They sensed the risk. But in a room packed with other brilliant minds, their concerns were silenced, not by force, but by this powerful, unspoken assumption that a group this smart simply couldn't be making a mistake.
And this phenomenon has a name. It's called groupthink. It's what happens when the social pressure to just conform inside a group of experts becomes so strong that it completely overrides any realistic look at the alternatives. Dissent starts to feel like disloyalty, and the group's collective intelligence becomes a tool to reinforce a single and often deeply flawed idea.
So, if intelligence and expertise aren't the answer, what is? How do we escape this trap? The key is a really powerful antidote, and it's something totally different from raw brain power. It's called intellectual humility. And the key phrase to focus on here is independent of IQ. This has nothing to do with being less smart. It's all about having a different relationship with what you know. It's the active, ongoing willingness to just entertain the possibility that you might be wrong. So, how can we actually get better at this? Well, it starts with some simple, but let's be honest, difficult practices. You have to actively look for opposing views, not as threats you need to defeat, but as chances to stress test your own thinking.
You learn to get comfortable saying the words, "I don't know." And ultimately, you start treating your intelligence less like a weapon for winning arguments and more like a tool for building better ideas.
All of this really leads us to a pretty fundamental challenge, the need to completely redefine what we even think it means to be smart. And this uncovers a deep paradox in how most of us were educated. Think back to school. What got rewarded? Speed and certainty, finding the one right answer fast. But what did that system neglect? It almost never taught us how to be productively uncertain, how to change our minds, or how to handle being wrong. In fact, it usually punished those very things.
So maybe we need a new definition. Maybe true intelligence isn't about the sheer volume of facts you can store in your brain. Maybe it's about your process. It's having the self-awareness and the courage to look at your own ideas and admit when you might have it all wrong.
Which leaves us with one final question for you to really think about. Take a look at your own intelligence, at your own expertise, and ask yourself this. Are you using it as a fortress to defend everything you already believe? Or are you using it as a launch pad to discover all the things you don't yet know?